So Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is honestly one of the best interpretations of the webhead, and just the world of Spider-Man is just coming to life so well in this video game. And this video review, by the way, will just be focusing on the storyline aspects. I'll touch on some of the gameplay, but will predominantly focus on it as being a bit of a mini movie. And on that point, I just absolutely loved it. You can really tell that the producers and creators are just such big Spider-Man fans themselves, as they've taken everything we know and love about the character and about the world and about the wider Marvel world as well, and have just flipped everything on its head. Not to be the complete opposite of what you expect, but different to what you expect and have seen beforehand, which I think is really, really clever. And what I absolutely love is that they do take a lot of inspiration from other previous examples of Spider-Man, predominantly with the movies, and I just love it, as I loved Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2. I thought the world of Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man was just absolutely top notch, and I just loved it how they've ensured that this one is equally dark, and you really do feel like you're in it, in the same way that I personally felt really invested into the whole Amazing Spider-Man lore, and also, of course, borrowing from the brilliant Tobey Maguire series too. But one thing that I feel like people don't talk about is that it takes a lot of inspiration too from the incredibly criminally underrated Marvel Spider-Man animated series that just aired on Disney+. It is honestly so good, and I feel like a lot of things are taken from that. For example, partnering up Peter with Miles so closely and so smartly from the early days, which that show absolutely did do, as well as making a lot of people infused with the Spider-Man power. Of course, this game does it more from a Venom perspective, but the takeover from a Spider-Man perspective was done beforehand as well. And speaking of Venom, Venom trying to take over Earth with a lot of other symbiote characters was done there as well, so it was just so reminiscent to what I've seen before. But like I said, they definitely did do a brand new spin on it all as well. The world building was so good. I loved it, how it's really dark and really eerie and really creepy as well, and it really is Peter's storyline first and foremost. I know that upsets a lot of people, as they're like, why doesn't Miles get equal billing? But you know, I feel like Miles gets a lot of presence for what should be Peter's main storyline, as you know, you can play as both of these characters, you can interchange between a lot of them. Miles is really involved in the storyline throughout the entire game, and he has also got his own dedicated game, and the tease at the end of Marvel Spider-Man 2 seems as if Miles is going to get a second game. So don't worry, Miles Morales is going to get a lot of exposure. But you know, speaking of this game, I loved the opening, as firstly, it really did ensure that you immediately see Peter and Miles as being a bit of a partnership, and I loved it. That thread was definitely continued throughout this game. And I also loved it how Peter Parker is just being Peter Parker. He is trying so hard to hold down a career and is trying to be a teacher and is teaching the same class and school that Miles is at. I thought all of that was really, really clever. And like I said, I just loved it how in this game you really do feel both Peter Parker's storylines as well as Spider-Man storylines, and of course all of the tension that is involved in trying to do both, which we definitely do also see by the end of this video game. But I just loved it how they really did set that off right from the beginning. But he's not able to hold on a career as a teacher, as of course he's suddenly having to swing into action, quite literally, to save the day from Sandman, which is really similar to how you do see Sandman in Spider-Man 3. And we're then introduced to the next main villain in this game, which is of course Kraven the Hunter, and you can really feel how much of a predator Kraven is, and how truly unstoppable he is, and how much of a true threat he is, as he literally does turn New York City into his city, and he is pretty much running it. He's using all of his teammates to pretty much take over the entire place, and they are just such big thuggish characters that are so intimidating that they're easily able to take over the whole city. So like I said, Kraven was out for blood, and I love the misdirection that in the beginning, you know, he's freeing all of the prisoners in the exact same way that Doc Ock did do in the first game, as Doc Ock then did partner up with these villains and they were supporting him on his mission. And I love the misdirect, as you're thinking Kraven is doing the same thing, but actually he is just using these villains to be prey for his barbaric games. I just honestly thought it was such a mind-blowing moment, and it really does show how much of a brilliant character Kraven is. It's interesting, as he's never been one of my favourite villains. When I originally heard that No Way Home was going to focus on him, I was a little bit unapprehensive for that film, as I thought, oh god, Kraven once again. But actually I feel like this depiction of him really does show how sadistic and barbaric he really is. and I loved it. Peter Parker's jokes against some of Kraven's team, they were absolutely genius. For example, the guy who's dressed as a bear, that of course he killed, and Peter's like, look, sorry, I don't have any honey. I honestly think Peter's quips in this game were just so good. Speaking of the villains that Kraven frees, obviously Scorpion stood no chance. Scorpion was quite threatening, I thought, in the first game. So the fact that Kraven was able to remove him from the board completely was pretty shocking. Tombstone turning onto the good side was actually really, really wicked too. Rhino, I loved it. A little bit like Winter Soldier. He would pop up every now and again and was a true threat to all of the Spider-Man characters. And then of course we have Dr. Connors, who against his will is being forced to become the Lizard purely for Kraven's sadistic purposes. So I honestly think Kraven is just such a twisted character, as he just takes people and then just forces them to do whatever he wants them to do, but just does it in such a toxic way. So it really does put a chill down your spine, and when he does revert back to Dr. Connors, he wants to destroy the symbiote, as of course he realizes that the symbiote is not something that just bonds with someone, but actually then wants to take over them and then wants to take over the entire world. But let's come back to the symbiote, as of course that's a massive character in and of itself. But next we have to talk about Harry Osborn. So I love the character of Harry Osborn. I feel like Harry is pretty Shakespearean actually in some respects, and I just loved it, as he just wants to try so hard to want to be best friends with Peter Parker, but there are just so many things that just get in the way of this brilliant friendship between these two guys. And I just love all of the flashbacks back to when they were kids. As you can really see, there was such a genuine friendship with these guys. And in the beginning, when Harry Osborn does get the symbiote suit and they're partnering up together, those are really, really nice moments. But of course, it's not going to be that much of a compelling storyline if it's all those really happy moments between certain characters, as that friendship then gets really dark and twisted. And I just love how every single interpretation of Harry Osborn really has explored this in a really, really good way. And this game in particular, I feel like brings all of that together into a head. For example, all of the rivalry that these guys have, even though they don't intend to be rivals, they're kind of forced unintentionally into this situation. For example, with Norman Osborn seeing Peter Parker as a son, and especially being the case when Harry is just ridden with this disease and is almost dying, then you can see, Norman's attention is moving towards him. And of course, while he was in this hibernetic state, while he was just getting recovered, he feels like he's now being replaced by Miles Morales and harbors a bit of resentment, which we do get to also see being played out in terms of Harry's resentment against Miles. And this is pushed even further when he gets the Venom symbiote powers inside of him. So I feel like that little triangle was really, really clever. And another triangle that we didn't really see in this game, but has of course always been there in other places, for example the movies, is when MJ chooses Peter over Harry Osborn. And of course the symbiote we got to see chooses Peter Parker over Harry Osborn as well. So that moment was just so, so good. Like I said, we'll talk more about the symbiote in a minute, but I just really do always feel for Harry Osborn, as he just wants to get better all the time. He wants to just try and impress his father. He wants to be on the same level as Peter Parker, but so many things just always get in the way. And then of course, like I said, from a health perspective, he wants to get better, but Peter doesn't even want to give him the symbiote, as he knows the impact that it can have on him. So like I said, Harry Osborn is such a tragic Shakespearean character. So now let's talk about the symbiote. So first of all, it's not Eddie Brock for once that is becoming Venom, which I think is absolutely incredible. And I know a lot of fans were in outrage because of this, because they feel like, fundamentally, the first person that should become Venom should be Eddie Brock. Maybe they'll explore that in the next game, but I feel like it was actually done in a really good way in terms of making this Harry Osborn instead of Eddie Brock. And I always love, and I feel like they never really push it as far as they can do, in terms of Peter Parker's early stages with the symbiote suit. I feel like they did explore it pretty well here, but I always just want more, as I just love seeing the darker Peter Parker. And I think they explored it in the perfect way, as at first, this symbiote is giving him brand new abilities. He's becoming strengthened, he's got a healing factor, he can change clothes, it can become anything that Peter really wants to imagine, which I think is really, really great. But then I always just feel like they just want to remove it from Peter Parker too quickly, as I just feel like I said, that darker, edgier Peter Parker in all of the interpretations have just been really, really brilliant, and I would just love to explore that a little bit more. Going back to the underrated recent Marvel animated Spider-Man cartoon, they do explore this in a bit of a different way, as then Peter is able to get a different version of the symbiote powers without all of the negative aspects of being with the symbiote. So I think that was really, really clever in that particular cartoon, and I loved it, absolutely loved it, how they also got Anti-Venom in here as well, as of course in some respects Peter Parker's Spider-Man from a gameplay perspective is a lot more reduced versus Miles Morales, who now has these electricity powers and invisibility. So you have to do something to get Peter Parker on the same level playing field. So of course in the first instance, when you give him the symbiote powers, he is then able to be on the same level. But then when you remove that, what do you then do? So you give him the anti-venom powers to ensure from a gameplay perspective, he is able to maintain all of those additional power benefits. But also from a storyline perspective, he is now able to be some of the cure of this. He's able to get a new costume. He's able to flip all of the negative aspects of the symbiote into positives, which, like I said, could also be another thing that they were inspired by the brilliantly underrated, criminally underrated animated Spider-Man cartoon. So I think all of that stuff was really, really good. Like I said, I would have loved to have seen darker Peter Parker a little bit more, as he was such a cool character, but for what we did get, it was really wicked too. And going back to Harry Osborn, when, Peter Parker does reject the symbiote and then does want to destroy it and doesn't want to give it to Harry Osborn, as this could be the thing that cures Harry from his disease. But, he's like, look, this could take over you, this could destroy the whole world, he doesn't want that to happen. But then the symbiote escapes, merges with Harry Osborn, and then he becomes Venom. I honestly thought that was so good, and it really does show the ultimate showdown now that Harry Osborn really is to be powered up, not just to be equal to Peter, but actually is able to dominate him so much more. And then when you're able to play as Venom, that was absolutely brilliant. But like I said, let's go back from a storyline perspective for this review. So I think that was really, really cool to get Harry into the massive space that Venom does occupy. What I think was a bit of a missed opportunity is just to show all of the craziness that Harry does when he is dominating the symbiote suit and is able to create a lot of chaos in New York City, is able to completely destroy Peter's world. Because I feel like they really rushed it in terms of the symbiote's motivation, in terms of wanting to transform the Earth into the symbiote landscape, and was taking over loads of different people. For example, Mary Jane turning into Scream was a really nice touch, and was infusing all these civilians with the Venom symbiote. So I just feel like they really went down that path, which was good, and it was really showing that, the final act of this video game movie is really epic, is a massive showdown, is really intense. All of these characters have to be really rushing to resolve everything. So all of that stuff was really good. I just feel like it lost a little bit of its humanity-based storylines, which, like I said, as a fan, I was just a little bit more gripped with. But that being said, by the end of this movie, gosh, that was just so emotional. When you do get to see that Harry Osborn is nearly dying, but then the person that Harry really resents, which is Miles Morales, is the person that is actually able to revive him, which I thought was a really, really nice touch too. And it would have been interesting if Miles was infused with the symbiote suit, and in terms of him being a super powered individual with all of his electricity, invisibility, and symbiote powers. That again was a bit of a missed opportunity, but I guess they wanted to show that, Miles is a really pure character and really does earn the right of becoming the new Spider-Man when Peter Parker wants to take a bit of a break. Acknowledging that people wanted to see more from Miles Morales, but the storylines that you do see with him, I think were really impressive and also really emotionally driven, namely the reluctant relationship that he has to do with Martin Lee, which was so good, as of course he hates this guy, as he is the person that ultimately led to the death of his father. And the first interaction that you see with these two people facing off against each other once again is, of course, Lee is in this prison chamber that he can't escape from, and actually Miles decides not to save him, so pretty much leads him to his death. But then, of course, Lee comes back, and then they're in a bit of a grudge match that Kraven is forcing them into, which is pretty shocking. But then Lee ultimately sacrifices all of his negativity powers, which, by the way, I feel like was so cinematic and just came to life so well, in order to save Peter Parker. And then Miles has to say to him, look, I am not going to forgive you, but I'm going to choose not to hate you. And then Lee ultimately gives himself into the police because he realizes all of the bad stuff that he has done. So I feel like that arc was just so emotionally driven, but it wasn't the only thing that was emotionally driven. For example, when you're thinking Peter Parker's going to die, even though you know that the symbiote's going to ultimately save him, those sequences were really, really brilliant. Like I said, the Harry Osborn ones were absolutely unbelievable. And then right at the end, when you see Norman Osborn blaming all of the Spider-Man for the death of Harry Osborn, I feel like Norman has such a big ego, he's not able to take any responsibility. And then the most emotional one of all is when you really dive into Peter's mind and you see all of the burning regret that he has over the death of Aunt May. Oh my god, that one just really did hit all of the feels, especially as you really do see how close these two characters were in Marvel Spider-Man 1. And of course, it does hark back to the death of Aunt May from Tom Holland's Spider-Man in, of course, Spider-Man No Way Home. So Marvel Spider-Man 2 was honestly so good, but now let's look at what's going to happen in the future. So of course, like I said, we're probably going to get another Miles Morales dedicated solo game, as Peter Parker is of course taking a bit of a break, and that NTs, that Silk is now going to come into the fore, which I think is going to be really cool, and I just can't wait to see Silk and Miles together in that next game. And of course in that game we'll get to explore Miles as well so much more. We've of course got an upcoming Wolverine game which is set to be within this universe, which could be really cool. And of course when the next Peter Parker dedicated Marvel Spider-Man 3 game is going to come out, that is going to be absolutely brilliant, as of course we're going to see Norman Osborn transforming into Green Goblin. Maybe Harry Osborn will also become Green Goblin. But what I'm really excited about is seeing Doc Ock becoming Superior Spider-Man and taking over Peter Parker's mind, which again was done over a couple of episodes arc in the brilliantly criminally underrated Marvel Spider-Man animated cartoon. And maybe we're also going to get Carnage in this game as well, and maybe he was able to escape when Mary Jane, Miles and Peter were able to eradicate all of the symbiote meteor powers from everybody in New York City. Maybe he was able to escape and is also going to be another villain in that third game. I literally cannot wait. And Doc Ock did tease that, this is going to be the final chapter, so maybe they might even kill off Peter Parker, which really would allow Miles Morales to then continue and properly take over the mantle of Spider-Man, which could be really shocking if they decide to go down that road. And maybe we're going to get Daredevil, maybe we're going to get other X-Men characters if we're going to get Wolverine, maybe we'll get more Marvel characters, as they did tease, the Baxter Building and the Avengers Tower building in New York City too, so that could be absolutely incredible. I just am so here for it. I cannot wait for even more emotionally driven storylines. So like I said, the first Marvel Spider-Man game, the Miles Morales game, and this one, they just keep up in the ante every single time. And this game was just a pure delight. And so for all of those reasons, I'm going to give Marvel Spider-Man 2 a mega 8.5 out of 10. Now I'd love to hear from you. What did you think of Marvel Spider-Man 2? Let me know all of your thoughts and all of your theories. What do you think is going to happen next in the comment section below? And I look forward to seeing you in my next video.